remember that they are changing my voice. Before I start this video, I'd like to point out that I've had a crush on females of various races. I'm the type of person who naturally gets along with people. I insist that people do what's right, and I get full of righteous indignation for a good reason, and at the appropriate time, what have you. I'm explaining what is fair and just and right here. To be anti-martyr is anti-human, right? To be anti-moral martyr, morally precise martyr, is to be anti-human. And the true idea of Christ that all these false images you see are superimposed on, including false images that are black. The true idea of Christ is the martyr of martyrs. It's the pinpointed, correct martyr. So this video is about the Top Martial Arts Challenge proof with my identity. Okay, when coupled with my identity, you get the ultimate proof of something. Again, the Top Martial Arts Challenge proof with my identity, the ultimate proof of something. Point number one. I often use the Native American example to help a racist planet understand. People are more racist than they think. It's conditioned into them to be tribalist, to have racial pride to the point where they do racist things like discriminate based on race. Instead of looking at the content of someone's character on a spectrum, people absolutely date based on race. They say things like their type. How can somebody with character not be your type, and somebody who just happens to be your race is more your type because of relatively superficial commonalities? Because you're bred to be racist to some degree. Okay, that's part of why that is. There's other reasons why that is, but that's part of why that is. Okay, so again, I often use the Native American example to help a racist planet understand. Because we understand at least the modern forms or conceptions or stereotypes of Native Americans more than we understand other tribes on the planet. When I say we, I really mean the American people, okay? Because I kind of, I transcend the American people. But so the American people understand these ideas of a Native American people in those ways more than they understand other tribes on the planet, including the Zulu tribe, even though Shaka Zulu is pretty famous here in America. Okay, so if man had started in America with a Native American tribe, though they didn't, and that Native American tribe spread out around the world, and they all looked back at the original tribe and said to them that they are now better than the original tribe, and that their history, the history of the original tribe is not as significant, when it would be more significant as they are more like the original model due to them staying in the land, okay, and cultivating the spirit in the original land, in the original habitat. Think about a leopard versus a snow leopard. A snow leopard changed as it left the habitat of the leopard and went to the snow. But it's more to it than that. It would also change in other terrains as well, and in other climates. Anyone with sense would immediately call them out on their disgraceful behavior. For example, if we had a meeting, if we're all Native Americans and we had a meeting of, say, Cherokee, Apache, pick a tribe, and the people who ventured out from the original land said to, say, the elders or the people who stayed in the original land for generations, okay, while the other people left for generations, mind you. And the people who left said, hey, the history of those people who left is more spiritually significant, is more significant on a more profound level than the people who stayed on the original land. Anyone with sense would say, you're wrong, because you went to London or France or Thailand or Saudi Arabia. Doesn't mean that your history after you left is more significant in the history of the people who stayed, because that's where the original land is, right? That's where the original cultivation is. However, if the people who stayed took on the colonial mentality more than an individual who left, for example, or group, but let's zoom in on the individual. That individual might be more in touch with God and the original martial arts spirit, and really would be, right, than the people who stayed in that land. But as we look at the peoples of the world and how they've changed, with the abundance of evidence that we have no reason to believe that the people who left maintain the Spirit of God more than the people who stayed, except for when it comes to my immediate family. And there's something to be said about some of the people who left during the slave trade, what have you. This is a very important point. If you don't understand this point, then you don't understand the Bible. You don't understand life. You don't understand justice. You don't understand romance, right? Your moral, mental, spiritual, romantic prowess is not that great. You have to understand this point. So we would expect people in Nigeria, for example, the heart of Africa, okay, who maintain the warrior spirit more than people in Ethiopia, to be closer to God, basically. But there'll be some aspects of people in Ethiopia that might very well cover some aspects that are missing from that. But the warrior order, God is a warrior, Exodus 15:3, would be with somebody who descends from Nigeria in a certain way. Now you might say, well, earlier you said that the people who leave can't claim that their culture is better. Yes, but I also brought up that if they maintained the warrior continuity, that African tribal warrior continuity at the highest level when they left, that they would then be more in the original culture, because the original culture, before it is the land, it is God and martial arts. Before it is the look of a people, it's God and martial arts. And frankly, white people, Jews, they simply don't do martial arts. Krav Maga is like a military hand-to-hand combat and self-defense. It's not the same as mind, body, soul, spirit martial arts. And that is how we get from Africa, Ethiopia, where mankind perhaps started somewhere in that area. It's very believable. But certainly we know that Africans are the most ancient people with the ancient continuity for various reasons. And part of it has to do with where they cultivated their way about them, what have you. But that's how we get from that Ethiopia to 2025 in America, where I'm here instead of anywhere in Africa. And it has to do with colonialism and being displaced from colonialism. When we look at physical features, right, black people are the greatest warriors, it has to do with other people being displaced, because when it came to hand-to-hand martial combat, black people went beyond other people. Now, which ones? Somalians, Ethiopians? No. Kenyans? No. South Africans? Closer, but South Africans were actually displaced by more Central and West Africans, if you look at their history, who had migrated to South Africa and who had contributed to the Zulu nation in South Africa. Those are Central and West African genes mixed with the locals, and it was the prevailing group were the West African genes. So we see examples of this, just like with the history of Northeast Africa, where we don't see these people really invading effectively until they have certain technologies, like chariots, okay, and eventually heavy armor, which leaves the realm of spirit, for the spirit, what spirit conquered? And if you do your due diligence and you look into Nigeria is like a combination of various African nations. It's the most populated. Okay, it was about twice as populated as the next most populated African nation. So at one point it was Egypt, and there's a lot of foreigners in Egypt, right? A lot of Arabs, what have you. And there was probably at one point there was like 80 million Egyptians, and there was like 130 or something million Nigerians. And you look at how many of those Egyptians are actually black Africans, there's not that many. So Nigeria is by far the most populated black African nation in modern history. And part of that is the Igbo tribe. So it's the heart of being a black African, right? Remember, Kuro Obi, black belt, Obi means heart. It's the heart of Africa in location, and it's heart of Africa in terms of human cultivation, what have you. And so you get that intense Nigerian spiritual power. The Lord is a warrior. Now, some Ethiopians have some muscle, some of them are nice people, but they're not that intense Nigerian that really makes it clear the lion of Africa, the lion of the human race, is a Nigerian lion. The leopard is a Nigerian leopard. The falcon is a Nigerian falcon. However, I can't stress this enough. It saddens me. I have to point this out because a lot of them came so close. After my flesh dies, nobody will be able to continue God's work. Nobody. But you have to understand why you're here. You should tell your children what has happened here. You should rally to me. You should stop reproducing. You should do the right thing. I'm telling the truth. I tell the truth. All right, so because of the jealousy of the governing class, they refuse to acknowledge the moral, spiritual, mental, romantic, martial arts, and cultural supremacy of the Royal African Falcon top martial arts order. I'm sure you understand what ethnocentrism, right, is. People who are kind of tribalists, racial supremacists. Eurocentrism is a huge part of colonialism, huge part. They want people to think that things center around Europe, but they don't. They center around where man was made in God's image, which was Africa, right? Genesis is figurative. The Garden of Eden is in the spiritual realm. See the book of Joel. For those of you who say, no, it's in the Middle East. No, it's not. It is not in the Middle East. See the book of Joel, the prophet Joel. It says that before the punishing army, the army that's sent by God to punish people, okay, it's like the Garden of Eden. What, is the whole world the Garden of Eden? What, is Israel magically the Garden of Eden? No. It's talking about the spiritual realm. It says behind them is like a desert waste. Okay, and we see that also talked about in the language of the Egyptians, which the Jews at one point shared. And that language is such that Horus is associated with the fertile land, right? The Garden of Eden. And Set is associated with the desert. And they're not just talking about the physical land, okay? They're talking about the spiritual realm. And if we look at the book, in Noah, for example, right? There's this flood, and he has 3 children. If Noah was very much a righteous man, he's going to go, why did he go straight to Babylon? No, he had 3 children, and they became the continents of the world. They became, Ham, Shem, and Japheth, right? Ham stands for Africa, basically, and also he spread into Canaan, right? And into the Middle East, right? Shem stands for the Middle East, which was dominated by black people. That was the divine order. Ham begot Cush, right? Ham begot Mizraim, which is Egypt. Canaan, which is, would eventually become Israel. And Ham begot Cush, Cush begot Nimrod. Nimrod made his cult center on behalf of God in the Middle East. So the history it's a black martial arts history. And Nimrod was a mighty warrior before God, a righteous, mighty warrior before God, a mighty hunter, what have you. In some translations it says he was the first mighty warrior, because nowhere leading up to that do we see that a mighty warrior is mentioned. Now, if God is a warrior and the first mighty warrior is a black man, what does that tell you about the divine order? That you have to look to Africa. And then science says that man started in Africa and it comes together a certain way. So the Garden of Eden is in the African spirit. And it wouldn't matter if it started in Ethiopia or Somalia or wherever, or even the Middle East. It's in the spirit of Africa. So the Garden of Eden is in the martial arts spirit of Africa. And man was made in God's image, what the evidence shows us, in Africa. But even if I was wrong, it doesn't matter, because it's in the martial arts spirit. The author of Genesis took the time to say that Ham begot Cush, Cush begot Nimrod, Nimrod was a mighty warrior for the Lord, Genesis 10. Then in Exodus 15, and Exodus is the second chapter in the Bible, the second book in the Bible, it says that the Lord is a warrior, when Moses is praising him. And going back to Genesis, the proverbial saying was like Nimrod, a mighty warrior before the Lord. And Proverbs is a book to understand the other books in the Bible. See Proverbs 1, verses 1 through 7. Understand the riddles, the parables, the sayings of the wise in the Bible. And that's not just Jesus. Proverbs was written in the Old Testament before Jesus. which means it's talking about the author of Genesis as well. That proverbial saying is defining the martial art order of God. And the martial art order is the order. 1 Samuel 17, David versus Goliath. It is how God selects the order. Before Abraham, Ham, I am. And why is Abraham named after Ham? Because it's a divine martial art order. And he heard the proverbial saying as he was from Ur/Chaldea, which is in the Babylonian Empire, historically. And so he was aspiring to be like an African martial art king who had established Babylon. And in the Bible it says, look to the quarry from which you were cut. Go to the root, right? The root in us. What is the source? What is the path? What is the route that God's Spirit took to David? It went through Noah, through Nimrod. Because between Noah and Nimrod, who really impresses God? It doesn't really make that clear. But it pronounces the martial art root. Amos 9:7, are you not the same as the Cushites unto me, O children of Israel? Ham begot Cush, Cush begot Asa. Aren't you in the same martial arts spirit, is what it's saying. Because the warrior is cited again and again. Psalm 18, Psalm 19, Psalm 24, Psalm 89, 1 Samuel 17. Isaiah 42:13, I think it is. It's been a while since I cited that one. We see it elsewhere. It says, Jeremiah, the Lord is with me like a mighty warrior. The Lord is the mighty warrior who saves. The heavenly warrior defeats the beast, Revelation 19. It's a recurring theme that's extremely, extremely significant. Judges 3, God taught the Israelites warfare by leaving other nations around them. So not only are you not supposed to take on an identity of another nation, you should have one human identity in the Royal African Falcon Martial Order, whether you're a martial artist or not, and whether you want to be or not. But these other people are there, these other identities are there to teach the martial art order warfare, and that's not what we see. It's not Martin Luther King who rose up to face the oppressor and stood out. Malcolm X. Both of them are a little wrong about their religion, story for another day. The Black Panther Party and so on and so forth. Granted, to some degree, these were government groups, right? A government ruse. But why did they choose them? Because it doesn't take a master psychologist or a master analyst to understand that God set the black man apart, certain black people apart, as the divine order of God. And I'm not a racial supremacist. These are the facts. I'm biracial. If I was a racial supremacist, I'd be like a mulatto supremacist. I'm not the same as someone who's all, quote unquote, all black. But these are the facts here. And I am above everyone who's all black and all anything else and mixed with anything else that ever lived. But you have to go the proper way to get to the proper place, and you have to get there. And like Martin Luther King said, I'll get there with you if you rally to me. Okay. Point number 2. One must put a lamp on its stand and to try to explain why we are here to the world is better and more noble than keeping it to oneself. How many of you think I should keep this to myself and be a monk and just do martial arts and say, hey, they'll leave me alone if I do that? How many of you think that I'm doing the right thing? So it is greater than keeping it to oneself. Also, recent years have made it clear that time is of the essence, right? Timing, right? Urgency, urgency, responsibility. Can your heart respond? The Lord weighs the heart and the motives. And people are tested by their praise. My praise praises God and the idea of being a martyr for God. As I put myself out there and I'm being poisoned and fumed and persecuted, and one way or another, my death will be a result of that persecution. Years of my life are cut short. And I fully anticipate dying for God, which will be the greatest day of my life, by far. Not only are the most righteous people screened out historically, but artificial intelligence and brain hacking technologies present a threat that cannot be quantified, but certainly make it clear to us that it's time to stop breeding. And if you look at the noble virtues of Buddhism and you look into that, the most sincere Buddhists did not believe in reproducing. They did not believe in having kids, as far as my understanding. I'm not an expert of it, but that's my understanding of it. Point number 3. These things have proven that going out to try to save people and reason with people is greater than withdrawing like a Catholic monk or something. And on top of this, they have accepted the boundaries of white supremacy and things of that nature. I have not. Point number 4. And I know they made it so I sound weird at times. They changed my voice in the video. But listen to what I'm saying more than how I'm saying it. Any plan that does not include doing the Royal African Falcon top martial artist justice is a failed plan. For example, if Asians were to think of a plan to outmaneuver the New World Order and say that it was the whites, Jews, and LGBT people that scream me out, it would be a selfish plan, right? To outmaneuver them and to, then try to, replace me or whatever and say, hey, we're the good guys, right? That'd be a selfish plan. The word selfish is even like the phrase see flesh, right? You scramble it, you get is flesh, and SI can sound like SE, right? See flesh. Scrambled in that way.